About 4 years ago, what has been referred to as the Epcot Overhaul was started at Walt Disney World. Being teased since 2016, this project would involve closing damn near half the park in order to completely revitalize it and address many of the issues that have built up over its 40 years of operation. The overhaul brought with it new rides, attractions, shows, and even an overall new look and feel. And as of today, the overhaul is seemingly complete. So the question is, did Disney address all the problems that they set out to tackle? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to know, well, what problems did Epcot have that prompted Disney to overhaul it in the first place? Well, the one major thing that Disney themselves mainly harped on was the fact that Epcot was a bit outdated. It hadn't received many new attractions really since the turn of the millennia, and many older attractions that at the time claimed to give insight into the future now no longer serve that purpose. So more specifically, Disney's exact words for their goals for Epcot post this overhaul was that not only would it no longer be outdated, but it be timeless and relevant going forward. On top of this, there was also the matter of capacity. Like every Disney park, they are seemingly overcrowded, right? I mean, they are the most attended parks in the world. And ultimately, there just wasn't enough things to do at the park that could handle the amount of people coming in on a daily basis, and that results, of course, in extremely long lines. So the Epcot Overhaul, by adding new attractions that had presumably higher capacity, the goal would be to ultimately cut down on those wait times. The final third problem they wanted to address was very unique to Epcot itself. You see, Epcot at the time was not really seen as a very family-friendly park. There were not many family-friendly attractions or attractions geared towards younger audiences, and much of the draw for Epcot at the time was World Showcase and its eating and drinking around the world, which of course is a much more adult-oriented experience. So the goal of this overhaul would be to make it more appealing to young children, as well as ultimately their families. So alright, these all seem like pretty worthy problems to address, and seemingly if they were taken care of, the park would certainly be much better off for it. So alright, let's get to work. Disney, what is your first order of business to take care of these three core issues? Hold on folks, I'm getting word right now. No, that can't be right. That just doesn't even make sense. What? Huh? Really? Oh, okay, I'll tell him. Well, you're not going to believe this, folks. But yes, Disney presumably thought it was a good idea to replace the long-running, long-beloved fireworks show at Epcot, Illuminations, with a new show, Harmonious, which opened towards the end of 2021. Despite Illuminations' age, it was still extremely popular, so I don't really know how this addresses any of the issues we just mentioned. So it being the very first part of this is not a very good sign going forward. It also doesn't help that, of course, Harmonious was received extremely poorly. It had these huge barges that blocked the view across the lagoon, and just really kind of made it so you can only really watch the show from certain angles, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see what was actually being projected onto the barges. So yeah, not a good successor to Illuminations whatsoever, and certainly did not address any of the issues we just talked about. Okay, so bad start, but you know what, you still have 4 years of new major projects coming up that, you know, it's okay if you have one bad egg in there, you know, if so long as the whole basket's looking good, you're chilling. So the next thing, which literally opened up just a few days after Harmonious debuted, was Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, a brand new ride that replaced nothing. Wow, what a rare sight at Disney. An actual expansion to a park and not a replacement? Whoa, mind-blowing stuff here, folks. So right off the bat, +1 Disney, because you actually went out and addressed the capacity issue. By adding a new ride when there previously was nothing there, you actually just straight up added capacity to the park without, you know, kind of having to do the math on, well, we replaced this ride with this ride. Did we actually add capacity? No, you didn't replace anything. So you actually added capacity to the park, undebatably. Plus, you also added a new sit-down restaurant and a quick service restaurant. So man, I mean, this was a fantastic way to start off the overhaul. We're just going to ignore Harmonious, okay? But seriously, this is great. Until you actually ride the ride. The ride sucks, alright? I'm just going to come out and say it, okay? It feels like the ride was built like 10 years ago, right? You talk about being outdated, this ride feels outdated right off the bat. You may be wondering, well, why that is? Well, because the ride literally is 10 years old. It opened in 2014 at Disneyland Paris' sister park, Walt Disney Studio. And they made next to no changes when they opened it at Epcot. You would think, right, a ride that is 10 years old, that you would make some upgrades, some enhancements to it before you bring it over to a different park. But nope, they kept it exactly the same, said, no, this thing's still pretty modern, and they opened it up anyways. And when you think about all the other rides that opened up, actually some of them before it, like the other two trackless dark rides that currently are at Disney World, Rise of Resistance, and Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, it's clear that those rides, which opened up earlier, mind you, are clearly outclassing it in every regard from a technological standpoint. And even when compared to the like comparisons at Universal, like Spider-Man and Transformers, which had opened way earlier, even those outclass it from a technological standpoint. Plus, the plot of this ride is literally just, hey, remember the movie? Here's the exact same story again, but in ride form. Isn't that amazing? Listen, when the parks first opened in the 50s and the 70s, that could be forgiven. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, you made a ride that literally is just Peter Pan, the movie. Okay, that's cool. But nowadays, the fact that we are still doing that, when you got Universal creating like whole new lore for their universes in their rides, it's like, how are we still just saying, hey guys, remember the movie? Here it is in a ride. No, that is dumb, that's boring, and that is not interesting or notable in any sort of way. So Ratatouille is kind of a tricky thing because it addresses capacity in a major way, and it also even adds family-friendly aspects to Epcot, especially in World Showcase. So it even addresses things in that regard as well. But it really does come up short as far as making the park less outdated. It actually kind of makes it feel more outdated because you're now adding a ride that clearly just should not have been a ride that opened post-2020. And you know what? Let me throw in one more caveat to that capacity thing. I know I just praised it to the high heavens for adding capacity to the park, but here's the thing. Ratatouille itself, the ride, does not have a whole lot of capacity. The ridership per hour is very low. This ride will almost always have one of the longest waits, if not the longest wait, in the park, regularly being well over 90 minutes. I'm sure this ride had plenty of built-in capacity for Disneyland Paris, but for Walt Disney World, it's not enough. So, they really should have made some changes before bringing this ride over. The next part of the Epcot overhaul was to open up a brand new ride in Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. This ride, opening up in 2022, replaced Ellen's Energy Adventure, a ride that was extremely unpopular and clearly outdated and absolutely needed to go, so already +1 there. Now that being said, Ellen's did have way more capacity than Guardians does. However, because of how unpopular Ellen's was, it rarely ever lived up to the max amount of capacity that it could actually service. So yes, even though Guardians' max potential riders per hour is less than what Ellen's theoretical riders per hour would be, because Ellen never got up to that max level, Guardians almost certainly is getting more riders per hour than Ellen's ever did. And let me tell you, the ride is fairly solid, and it actually adds a good amount of thrill to the park that really didn't have much thrill to begin with. I mean, really, the only rides that were giving any sort of thrilling aspects were really mainly Mission Space and Test Track. So even though it wasn't an issue that Disney was going in planning to address, they kind of inadvertently addressed a lack of thrill issue at Epcot. But when you talk about addressing the family-friendly aspect, well, roller coasters aren't typically noted as being the most family-friendly. Now, yes, this isn't a very intense roller coaster. I think that really any kid could ride it if they have the cojones to do so. And that's kind of the problem, is that most kids don't like to ride these roller coasters, especially if it's indoors and they can't see what the ride does. So again, certainly not an addition that's addressing every issue on the table, but it's moving the needle at least in some sort of positive way. The next addition would come in late 2023 with the Moana attraction, Journey of Water. This was a walkthrough attraction that involved many different jumping water fountains, interactive elements, but would ultimately be just a glorified queue for a Moana meet and greet. So yeah, I mean, it can have quite a few amount of people go through there per hour, so decent capacity in that regard, but because you can go through it so quickly, it's certainly not eating capacity, right? It's not taking people out of the rest of the park for a substantial enough amount of time to make any sort of meaningful difference as far as lines go at any of the other attractions. So This isn't really helping the capacity issue whatsoever. But of course, it is a family-friendly attraction, and I mean, you could argue it's, well, moving the park in a positive direction as far as addressing the outdated issue, because it is kind of a unique attraction. But the thing is, like, I really do wonder, could this be like an Ellen's Energy Adventure where it's basically a ghost town in a few years? That's the thing that worries me. And if you talk about the park being outdated, it kind of feels like this is not potentially going to help the issue, but we'll have to see in the years ahead. And then finally, in December of 2023, on the same day, the brand new hub for Epcot behind Spaceship Earth would open up with a Walt Disney statue, as well as these cool lighting patterns, and a new fireworks show. Wait, what? Didn't we just do that already in this video? Oh, Harmonious was so bad, they had to replace it with another fireworks show, this time Luminous. Oh. Yeah, that's a great use of money there, Disney. That's awesome. Great. Now, okay, the fireworks are better than Harmonious, okay, but that wasn't like a high bar to clear. So great, okay, you improved it, but Luminous is still really undeniably still lackluster in comparison to Illumination. So again, it kind of raises the question, why did you even touch the fireworks show in the first place when it does nothing to address these three issues? Who knows? And I suppose updating the hub does address the outdated issue. However, it does kind of feel like they went for a very modern feel, a very modern take on things. Like, it kind of feels like this is like you're walking through like an outdoor mall almost. So I really do kind of feel like, well, in 5-10 years, this could easily feel outdated again anyway. So not really the timeless look that Disney claimed they were going for when they started this project. So there it is, the Epcot Overhaul. When you put it all on screen at once, it really doesn't look like that much given how many years this took and how many years there were work walls up that were, making the park not very nice to walk around in. But actually, believe it or not, the reason why this doesn't look like a lot is because Disney actually had more planned for this Epcot Overhaul that ultimately they decided to cancel. One of these things would have been the Play Pavilion, an entirely new land in Future World that would have been completely focused on young children attractions. Of course, that doesn't come, and that would have been a huge add, not only for capacity, but also for the family-friendly aspect. And who knows what the final project would have actually looked like, but maybe it could have even played a part in addressing the outdated issue of Epcot as well. There was also supposed to be a new Mary Poppins attraction back in World Showcase in the United Kingdom Pavilion, which also never came to fruition. This is going to be basically just a teacups ride. But, I mean, hey, it would have added some capacity. Once again, would have added a family-friendly attraction. And when we talk about Mary Poppins, I mean, Mary Poppins is about as timeless as it gets. So that would have certainly added to the outdated feel of Epcot and would have added a much-needed another ride in World Showcase. Obviously, Ratatouille helped with this regard, but you still only have 3 rides in all of World Showcase. Adding another one would have definitely helped add more capacity to that backside of the park. So when you look at the complete picture of what the Epcot Overhaul ended up being versus what it could have been, you realize that, well, as far as addressing the outdatedness of the parks, well, maybe for now they don't feel that outdated, but it kind of feels like, in a couple years it probably will feel outdated once again. Capacity has been improved, but not in really any sort of meaningful way. Like we mentioned, Ratatouille constantly gets super long lines. Guardians lines are so long that it still is on the virtual queue here 2 years later. Which, by the way, the reason why is because Disney didn't have the foresight to build a big enough queue. I mean, even when this thing's only like a 30-minute wait, the queue is still backed up all the way to the door, which is just unbelievable. It's like, how do you not build enough queue space? How does that happen? And let me tell you what, too, food is even running out of capacity. I mean, for any of these booths, for the festivals, you'll see lines down the street. Like, that's ridiculous, right? You're waiting 20 minutes just to order food. Not to mention that, good luck getting a sit-down restaurant, right? If you're not getting a reservation 60 days in advance, right? I mean, you have to sweat for these things, or you're just not getting to experience them. And as far as making Epcot a family-friendly experience, I mean, let me tell you, when I said what Epcot was at the beginning of this video, as this adult-oriented experience that's focused around drinking and eating around the world, you probably said, hey, that's what it is today. Yeah, because it still is. Epcot's perception has not changed among the general public. It is still not seen as a family-friendly park. It is definitely a much more adult-oriented, adult-focused park. So clearly, they haven't really made much of any strides in regards to addressing that issue. So even though I'm not going to necessarily paint the Epcot Overhaul as a complete and utter failure, because it definitely did make strides in every regard, albeit it didn't make the changes and completely fix the problems that it set out to do, it definitely was not the force of change that Disney was hyping it up to be, and I think many people were expecting, given how long the project was going on, how much of the park was closed to complete the project. So if you're looking at it from Disney's perspective, I think you got to be pretty disappointed. I think you got to feel like, we kind of underachieved here. I think what we were really setting out to do, and really all the problems that we said that we wanted to tackle, are still existing even after all these changes. So clearly, more work needs to be done, and guess what? More work is coming, as Test Track is getting refurbished. And that's it. and that's the thing, Disney's not even paying for Test Track to be refurbished. It's their one and only sponsor in the park left, with being GM, who's paying for it. So thanks, GM, you're helping us out here a little bit. But really, I mean, this has been definitely an underachieving overhaul. And there needs to be more done in order to actually get Epcot to where it needs to be. And I think that once we start to see the attendance numbers for 2023 come out, I think we're going to really start to see that, none of these new additions really move the needle for Epcot. In 2022, Epcot found itself behind Hollywood Studios and both Universal Orlando parks for that matter. But we don't want to talk about that though. No. Don't bring that up. But to be fair, parks are still in recovery mode. We're still a far cry away from the attendance numbers we were at in 2019. And it will be interesting to see when the 2023 numbers come out mid this year to see whether or not Epcot's overhaul, now that it's over, has pulled them up higher in the rankings or has shown any sort of meaningful impact to their attendance, or if people are actually choosing not to go to Epcot because these changes don't excite them or haven't actually addressed any of the issues. We'll have to see, because if that attendance number does not come in significantly higher, I'll tell you right now, I think Disney's going to have to throw in the towel and say that this overhaul was at the very least a disappointment, if not a complete and utter failure. But that's just my opinion, folks. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think the Epcot overhaul was a success? Did it improve the park in a meaningful way? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Love to hear what you have to say. And I'll see you all next time. Peace.